Rewind, your week in review, is sponsored by the Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. Sharing one goal, enhancing the quality of life in Wisconsin through the development and maintenance of a strong transportation network. The Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. It's how we get there.
Because I don't want to go backwards. I want to keep going forward. Together, that's exactly where we're going to go. God bless you.
I'm Steve Walters.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
This is Rewind, Wisconsin Eye and WisPolitics look at this week in the Capitol. First, I was there. Students raised their voices in protest at the Capitol. Number one, we asked the millennials, Representative Amanda Stuck and Representative Adam Nealon, who run the Future Caucus, what baby boomers did right and did wrong. And Jack Voigt, former state treasurer, said voters on April 3 don't abolish the job he once held, even though when he held it, there were 25 employees. Now it's down to one. I was there.
Regardless of age, we are demanding with every ounce of our being for gun reform. We are taking a stance against senseless gun violence and proving to the world that we are the change.
And if you don't believe us, just wait until the next election. We'll be the generation of voters and lobbyists and politicians to help end mass shootings.
What do you want? Gun control! When do you want it?
Now! We don't have enough clinicians of color in our community, so we run into individuals that we refer for services, and it's very difficult to refer a young 22-year-old black man to get services from a 40-year-old white woman, and they have nothing in common. There's no connection.
The opportunities that we've had growing up from the offspring of baby boomers is tremendous, phenomenal. I mean, from changes you've seen in education in schools, now you have personalized education. You have all these changes that we've had in education through the years that the kids going through that, they are not responsible for those changes. They're the beneficiary of those changes.
I do think for too long we've institutionalized discrimination and some of the social things that I think we're starting to really understand the full impact of now and really take some notice of. And that's where I'm excited about some of the millennial bipartisanship to really acknowledge some of those issues and do better where we haven't done so well in the past.
Democracy in the United States and in many other nations is clearly in trouble. Participation, as you know, is low, it's uneven, it's unequal. In the United States, specifically, the political climate is intensely polarized. Levels of social and political trust are very low. It seems we are less and less likely to come together to forge solutions to problems which, if left unsolved, have truly ruinous consequences.
If we decide to remove this office, Wisconsin would be the only state to not have a separately elected financial officer, treasurer, auditor, what have you. And some people will say, well, Sarah, I thought New York and Texas did remove their treasurer. Yeah, you're right, but they have a comptroller, and the comptroller has the same kind of fiscal management and responsibilities as a treasurer, so it's duplicative effort. We literally would completely lose those responsibilities.
I did a number of things that were more than just being a bean counter. I mean, I did things on behalf of the voters, regardless of party. And I thought that was a very important aspect of this job. The current treasurer wants to, and has, and try to placate the executive branch and the legislative branch, say, well, I'll remove all the duties and limit my staff. Why didn't he fire himself? Last 3 years, he's been taking a salary for doing basically nothing.
So, JR, less than 24 hours after the students came to the Capitol, the governor announced the details on his special session call. Let's walk through those quickly. He would create, in the State Justice Department, an Office of School Safety, spend up to $100 million on school safety grants. He would require mandatory reporting of all school violence threats. And let's rewrite anti-bullying laws so parents immediately notified. Finally, include trauma-informed care and adverse childhood experiences and training programs. I'll give you a chance. What's not in here?
Well, there's no arming the teachers, which A.G. Brad Schimmel says open to, and Governor Walker said in his travels to the state did not hear from teachers they wanted to have guns in the classroom. That's not in there. There also aren't any gun restrictions. We saw Florida do a bill that included, I believe, raising the age to
From
21.
18 to 21, yes.
Some things like that. There's no ban on bump stocks, those kinds of things. Of course, the bump stock thing the Trump administration is working on, but we're not seeing those kinds of measures, and the Democrats are saying it's not enough, that they should be going farther and doing other things. But of course, their package includes allowing a exemption to the levy limits for these improvements, but they also don't have, I believe, any real stringent gun restrictions in their package.
I didn't find it. And the Fiscal Bureau scores the Democratic package is what, $84 million?
The levy limit alone is about $84 million, and then DPI had asked for these other measures that were around $50 million. So what's interesting is the process about these bills.
Yes.
And this is, we'll wonk out for a second, but we have regular session that they set every January, their calendar. We have a special session, which you can call anytime. You have to pass the same bill in the same kind of session for the governor's desk. Robin Vos is talking about the Assembly coming back in special session for one day to do this package.
Next Tuesday.
Tuesday or Thursday.
Okay.
Because the Senate's on the floor Tuesday. And Fitzgerald's talking about the Senate doing this as an amendment to a bill on his regular session calendar on Tuesday. If that happens, somebody has to blink or this thing doesn't get to the governor's desk.
Right, because you've got to have some method to reconcile these two different bills. So the Speaker's going to bring the Assembly in special session, and the Senate's in regular session on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Well, that's, you also don't have background checks in here, which was, yeah. Okay, well, you alluded to it, but Senate Democratic Leader Schilling, nothing in the governor's package to keep deadly firearms out of the wrong hands, and Tony Evers, who has a role in this debate as a superintendent of public instruction. This is a big price tag, means nothing if you're not actually addressing the problem. So Democrats are lining up against this thing. I don't know, will they have a chance to introduce gun control and when both houses consider this next
They could
week?
try. The Assembly already got its vote on background checks. If you recall, last week on the floor, they brought up, to pull up some motions on that stuff. So they got their vote for their mailers come November. One concern I heard from Republicans ahead of this was, will they lose the message about this package because it will become what they didn't do, background checks, bump stocks, those kinds of things, versus what they did do. So you got to watch that messaging battle on the floor. And again, this is another symbol of the strained relations between Robin Vos and Scott Fitzgerald. That's something Governor Scott Walker wants, that there is pressure to do because of what happened in Parkland, Florida, just February 14th, that they can't get on the same page just on the procedure piece of this. And there's some gamesmanship going on because Robin Vos adjourned the Assembly regular session in February and said, we've done everything. Now take it or leave it, essentially. Fitzgerald, I pushed him to come back in regular session to the bill, saying, well, if I push it back to you in regular session, the door is open to taking up our version of the Senate version of the child tax credit, our version of the prisons bill down the line.
Right, but in response to the governor's special session and the items that he laid out, both Fitzgerald and Vos said we kind of like the governor's thing, the governor's recommendations, but
no specifics.
But you're right, they're crosswise on the process here and the procedure.
No, and there's still a chance that they will try to add their own things to the package. Robin Vos left earlier this week to go on a trade trip to Canada. His caucus hasn't met yet on this package. I'm not sure where the Senate Republican caucus is. Fitzgerald's statement said that they had a good discussion this week and a lot of their priorities line up with the governor's package, but didn't commit to the same exact things that are in this package that Walker wants.
Okay, now JR, I want to take a deep dive into what exactly is and isn't on the Senate agenda next Tuesday. Let's start with the Senate has announced that they're going to rewrite the Juvenile Justice Reform Package, passed the Assembly 94-0. So they're going along with the idea to close Lincoln Hills by 2021, but they want a task force to study what to do after that, whereas the Assembly is saying, let's replace the juvenile prisons with smaller facilities that would be run by counties. And also, where is the Senate on the $80 million that this reform would cost? Number two, and $350 million bonding authorization for a new prison.
That bonding was added to a parole revocation bill, right? So that's not there. What's interesting is...
But for it to become law, the Senate's got to take it as passed by the Assembly.
What the Senate's going to do with this bill is they're going to take the Assembly bill and do a substitute amendment to add their version of this stuff and send it back. The idea is by doing that, they give the Assembly the opportunity to come back and only have to debate the changes to that. But they're also, either way, they're saying, look, we're not taking your version.
Right.
Here's our version now. It's back in your court to take up.
Speaker Voss could bring the Assembly back in regular session to accept some of these Senate amendments, couldn't he?
Could, but he's given no indication so far he wants to. When I talked to him when he was flying up to Quebec earlier this week, he said that they'll come back for the special session and there's no intention to come back in anything else.
Wow. Oh, okay. So now let's talk about the $100 per child check. The Senate's going to strip the sales tax holiday, cost $50 million out of it, send it back to the Assembly. And so when the Speaker says he's not coming back, that also applies to the $100 check?
Again, who's going to blink? Will anybody blink at any of these things and come back? And there's also a subplot here about Governor Walker. He's not been known as somebody who twists arms and bends the legislature to his will. So here's an opportunity where he got a lot of stuff he wanted in the state address done, right? But the things are hanging out there. Lincoln Hills, $100 credit, pre-existing conditions,
rural development.
the $50 million for rural development. Those are not getting done right now or in jeopardy. Can he find a way to bring these guys to the table and get something done? I don't know. But there's clear that he is not bending them right now to what he wants.
Well, before the show, I went through the Senate agenda, as I know you did. The Assembly had sent the Senate 214 bills.
Yeah.
And on the Senate calendar is 110 of them.
Which is a healthy agenda for the Senate if you cover those guys for a while.
Absolutely. It's about 2 days worth of Senate deliberations. On that bill, on the Senate agenda, though, is the Kimberly-Clark tax break.
Which Roger Ross' office says they don't know if they have the support for.
Really?
They are waiting for word from Kimberly-Clark if they will accept the credits, and that may have an impact on whether it actually gets done. So that's still, even though it's there, it's not a done deal that gets done. There are still concerns from that caucus that if you do a bill like this, Republican caucus, that you set a precedent for your Harley-Davidsons, your Johnson Controls, you name your Wisconsin iconic manufacturer or company, that when they do layoffs, they will then say, well, where are my Foxconn-like credits?
Right. Okay, but let's return to the issue. The $50 million rural development.
Not on the calendar.
Not on the calendar?
Nope. Cost.
Dead.
Cost. It's interesting. Before all this flurry of activity, we were projected to have a ending balance, a net balance of $385.2 million mid-2019.
Right on. That's it.
Let's start doing some math. The per child credit is $122 million in change, not including the cost to administer it.
And not including the $50 million
The sales tax holiday, $50 million.
Right.
The school safety, $100 million, which would be money this biennium, but it'd be an ongoing appropriation, which means that pot would be there until it's spent.
Yep.
There's that. There's this other money, Lincoln Hills.
What about the $6.8 million to get millennials to move here?
There's that. There's a $50 million.
Is that on the Senate calendar? I
think
don't
so.
know. You think so?
There's a $50 million for a week. That starts to add up after a while. Fiscal Bureau did a memo a week ago of this is what would happen if you did every single Assembly bill. And this is before the $100 million for schools. It dropped the ending balance, net balance, to $117 million.
From 385 to 117.
So if you do every Assembly bill that's passed, the Senate passes all that, it all becomes law, plus bills that are enrolled, they've passed both houses awaiting a signature, drop to 117. That means if you do all that plus the $100 million for schools, you're at $17 million on top of the required statutory balance of $75 or $65 million.
I think it's $65 million.
So that's not a lot of room. And also, it restricts your ability to do stuff in the next budget.
And it puts liens on future state budgets, huge liens. Let's talk about, I find it very interesting. On the Senate calendar is a resolution that the Senate could resolve any future budget impasses. Now,
well, in its house, resolve it.
In its house.
Yes.
If Joint Finance wasn't done working on the next 2-year state budget by June 30, Senate leaders must add to the budget decisions JFC had made. Then Senate leaders could schedule it if it's a Senate budget bill. And if it's an Assembly budget bill, Senate leaders must sponsor a bill with JFC decisions made and schedule it for debate in the Senate. Mr. Fitzgerald, several senators expressed an interest in changing Senate rules to ensure that future budgets are completed on time and not subject to artificial delays by one house of the legislature. Parse that one for me.
So I don't wonk out too much on you, but there is a standing finance committee in each house. So in some ways, there are maneuvers that the Senate could take on its own with a budget bill if there's an impasse. This really adds a trigger of you hit this date, this is all going to happen. This is also being passed in March when the budget's not on the agenda until
Next.
a year and some months from now.
Right, next February.
We also have new rules will be passed in January. The new session comes in. We also don't know who'll be in charge.
Yes.
There's also a danger, if you really want to wonk out, about, well, what happens if there's split houses then? Then what's going to happen? You know, so this is an expression of the Senate of a frustration with the process and Republicans, but there are all kinds of things out there about, well, what's it going to mean down the road? And, you know, why don't you use the tools that you have?
Okay, but is it fair to say the Senate cannot grab control of how future budgets are passed on its own?
No, it can. This is setting a standard, and we want order, right? This is the message. We want order. But one house can't force the other house to do anything. So let's say it's the same players next session. Nobody changes. Nobody loses, you know. Republicans come back, and it gets to be July 1 or June 30th, and this isn't done. Yeah, Fitz can say, okay, here's our mechanism. But Robin Voss can say, that's nice, we're doing this over here. I mean, so there's some symbolism in there.
And they're offering this because the last budget was delayed. It should have been done by July 1, and it didn't pass until the fall.
Mid-September.
Right. Okay. Let's move on. There are some personnel changes close to the governor. Eric Shute is coming back. He had been the chief of staff and deputy chief. He was working in healthcare as United Health vice president. He'd been a senior legislative aide. You and I had worked with him. He was chief of staff for the late Kitty Rhodes.
Helped run Mark Green's campaign in 2006. Worked for the Republican Party, I believe.
Right. And the current chief of staff, Rich Zipperer, former assembly member, former state senator, will be moving to the PSC. What's the significance of this?
This is a domino effect of Scott Neitzel leaving as DOA secretary. When Neitzel left, you know, he's a guy from the private sector. I'm sure he did fairly well in his old job. He didn't need to be DOA secretary for a reason, but did a service, you know, kind of job. Ellen Novak moves from PSC to DOA. She has the skill set to fill that job. Worked in the legislature, knows the business community from her time at the PSC, you know, lawyer. That helps to fill that role. Well, now you got a vacancy at the PSC. Rich Zipperer, 43, I believe, former lawmaker. Going to PSC adds a nice thing to your resume.
Yeah.
So that gives him something else to add, fills that vacancy. Well, now you need somebody to run the day-to-day operations in the Capitol office. Eric Shute is somebody who Governor Walker trusts. He's worked with before. If you remember, it was like a coup to people that Walker got Shute to stay on after the 14 election through 15 to kind of run government for him while Walker's out running for president. What happened, though, is Walker's running for president, and it was supposed to be like this. Eric could be there a lot to kind of mind things, but Walker was gone pretty much most of that year because his star took off very quickly. Eric had stuff in his personal life that the demands were just too much, and he needed a break.
Right.
So this is a guy who's trusted coming back. The issue for Walker is it's happening months out from an election, not in the year before the election.
That's critical. He wants Eric Shute to be there to take the calls on the state government side when he's out campaigning for a re-elect.
And
he's very comfortable with Eric.
Don't forget, we just finished a budget in September. They will have budget proposals coming in to DOA this late summer, early fall.
Yeah.
They will send out budget instructions over the summer. The work never stops. Even though Walker's not guaranteed of being there for that budget, they have to begin the process. A person like Eric is a known quantity in the Capitol, and don't forget his time in the legislature. He may help smooth things over or work with, you know, people like Robin Voss or Scott Fitzgerald, having him in that role. Not that, you know, Zips, you know, obviously he worked in the legislature too, but Schute's been around for a long time. That gives him certain relationships that can help sometimes.
Okay, new subject. The Elections Commission held its first meeting with the new administrator, and it was announced that the federal government, Homeland Security, is going to conduct in May or June, a risk vulnerability assessment of Elections Commission and its IT systems. 2-week test with cybersecurity specialists trying to hack in, and Homeland Security then delivers a report. I'm struck. This is the Elections Commission moving on under the new administrator, Megan Wolf.
Yeah, and it's also moving on with this security issue that we've got these conflicting reports, right? DHS saying that there was this attempt to hack us, and the state saying no, it was this kind of like probe, that was about it, so for what it's worth.
Well, I had a chance to do a Newsmakers interview with Megan Wolf, and I asked her, so do you really think that actors, specifically Russian actors, did try to hack? And she said yes, but part of that interview is casting it forward, talking about Homeland Security review, and I said, is your biggest fear hacking before the November 6th election? Let's listen to how Ms. Wolf responded.
Homeland Security offers a variety of different services that we can utilize as part of that critical infrastructure designation. And one of those is a risk vulnerability assessment, or an RVA they call it. And what basically that does is they bring someone in to the Elections Commission and they try to see if they can find any vulnerabilities in our system.
So they'll come in over a period of how many days and how many different attempts?
Right. From what I understand, it's a 2-week assessment of our system, and there are various components of that. Some of that's going to be looking at more of the enterprise structure. Some will be looking at our actual applications and our databases themselves. And then other things focus on the human element of it, which is things like how our users operate within their emails that might have an impact on our systems.
And then Homeland will give a final statement?
They will.
Update?
They'll give us a final report on what they found and also suggestions about anything that we might need to do to seal up vulnerabilities.
Looking ahead to the November 6th election and all that's going to take place before then, is the potential for other hacking your biggest worry here as you become the administrator?
I don't know if it's my biggest worry, but it's something I'm very vigilant about and making sure that we are paying attention to and we are collecting all the resources that we can. And I only say that I'm not worried because I am so confident in the systems we have in place, as well as the partnerships that we've established with Homeland Security, as well as DET, and just our staff in-house. I think we have managed to constantly and consistently stay ahead of any issues that are out there because we are so well informed in making sure that we're vigilant on these issues.
Ray, JR, I had a chance this week to do a Newsmakers with Ray Cross, the UW system, Morna Foy together of the Tech College system. And I asked them, how are you preparing to train the next generation of Foxconn workers? And Morna Foy said 30 people are already working out of Gateway. And Ray Cross talked about the LCD potential of UW faculty expertise working with Foxconn on the next generation is very exciting. So let's just take a minute and listen to Morna Foy of the Tech Colleges, Ray Cross of the UW system, what they said in this week's Newsmakers. What role will each of your systems play in training Foxconn's potential 10,000 to 13,000 workers?
The most immediate demand they have right now is for construction and design folks. So that's going to rely on folks who have gone through, I hope, a lot of our construction and trades programs, but it's also going to rely on a lot of engineers that are coming out of the UW system. And I think, robotics, information technology, advanced manufacturing, those are all fields that people pursue credentials through both the university and the tech colleges in those industries, so that folks who come into Foxconn, again, this new generation of worker, we're going to provide the educational infrastructure that Foxconn hopes to provide for them as an employer to make their career a lifelong career with them.
The partnership that Morna's alluded to is really a powerful partnership between public-private institutions, technical colleges, universities, to determine how best to accommodate their needs. Identifying their needs is important, and we've been working with them in a number of ways to what do you need first and how might we work with you closely to advance that.
JR, I want to end the show with your update on the Supreme Court race, but before we do that, your stock picks. Rising.
Tailgating.
Tailgating. Let's tailgate. All right.
Fears of being a downer on Lambeau Field trumped the Tavern League. Basically, in the final days of the assembly being on the floor, they passed this bill that would allow wineries to extend their hours from 9 p.m. to midnight, okay? But to make the Tavern League happy, they added this provision that would kind of target wedding barns. These are basically facilities where some of them are actually barns that have been remodeled.
Yes.
But you can
at a cost of up to $500,000.
You can rent the facility, bring in your own food and booze, and have unlicensed bartenders. Well, the Tavern League does not like that because obviously that's a little bit of an exemption compared to other state laws. So the language was written that if you have rent a private facility, you have these restrictions. Well, if I pay like where I park for Packer games, I pay $20, $15 to park. That's paying to enter a private property, so I couldn't tailgate in theory there. There are also party houses up at Lambeau Field, right, all around that you can pay to get into a party. Now, LegCount said it could apply to those things, though it depends on the circumstances. So which means they really crack down these places, maybe, maybe not. But the second, like AFP and Will got a hold of this stuff and started blowing it up, Republicans went, whoa, that's not what we were intending for.
Unintended consequence, collateral damage of a winery hours bill.
Yeah, this gets into, whenever you talk about alcohol policy in Wisconsin, there are all these moving pieces, and if you push here, you get a little bit of pull here, and people get really sensitive about this. So this is going to fall apart this session. The question is going to come back next session and strike a deal that helps the wineries with the hours, addresses the tavern league with the beer bar or wedding barns. And oh, by the way, those wedding barn folks, they're not going to be happy about some of this stuff, so that could be a much more intense lobbying process next session.
With opening day for the Brewers coming, yay, tailgating.
Yes.
Okay, mixed.
Retirements, so we're not seeing a mass exodus yet, but we're up to 9 members of the Assembly who won't come back, who started in January of last year, not coming back. That includes Corey Mason, who's already been replaced by Greta.
He's the mayor of Racine.
But we've got Eric Genrich this week was
running
the one.
For mayor of Green Bay, excuse me.
Not going to run for election, run for mayor of Green Bay. Josh Gruzinski, who's a nephew of Stan Gruzinski. I'm sure you remember Stan.
I do.
He is running for Eric's seat as a Democrat, heavily Democratic seat. That's really the primary what's going to dictate there. We have 4 senators who have already announced plans to go elsewhere. So we've got Shel Hart's already been replaced by Patty Schochner, but we have Lesay's resigned to go to the Walker administration. Lee Vukmer is going to run for U.S. Senate, and Kathleen Vine out for governor.
Right.
If you look back the last decade, on average, we get at least 2 or 3 senators who leave. We get at least around a dozen members of the Assembly who leave. One exception was 2012. We had like 33 notices on candidacy, which you have to file if you're not going to run for your seat. But that was inflated because they redrew all the districts and numbers changed.
Right.
So I think 15 of those 33 ran for different number of districts. But anyway, the point is...
It was also after the Act 10 controversy. Go ahead.
But also, the point is, we haven't seen a huge number of people take off yet. But I'm watching Terry Moulton, State Senate. We're all waiting to see what he's going to do. Kathy Bernier in the Assembly has said if Moulton leaves, she might run for a Senate seat. We're watching Lee Narrison of Southwestern Wisconsin. We're watching Ed Brooks of Southwestern Wisconsin, all Republicans.
Brooks for some health concerns.
Yep, so we're all watching to see what are they going to do. And if they leave, then it makes it harder to hold those seats if they're swingy, like Ed Brooks' seat, like Lee Narrison's seat, like Lily Bernier's seat, in a difficult year for Republicans. So watch that. It could turn into a rising down the road.
Okay.
And if we see more Pennsylvania 18s, it may give some Republican swing districts second thoughts about what's going to happen in November.
Which is a perfect transition to your falling.
Like I planned it. You have a seat that Donald Trump won by 20 points in November of 16.
Pennsylvania 18.
The Democrat at last check had like a 600 vote margin. Now, I don't know if it's been called officially, and they may have a recount, but you shouldn't have 20-point seats be competitive, period. Now, Paul Ryan's explanation was, well, this guy, Conor Lamb, ran as a conservative. Well,
against Pelosi? Yes, go ahead.
Well, a conservative who said he was against the GOP tax bill because of corporate giveaway. A conservative who said that he personally opposes abortion but doesn't support a ban after 20 weeks. A conservative, so I'm not sure that's really a conservative. Yes, he doesn't want to support Nancy Pelosi, but the Democrats found a candidate who fits the district, ran a great campaign, and had a Republican run a lackluster one.
Yep.
Now, my question is, what's this mean for November? Is every 20-point Republican seat on play? No.
No.
It's the quality of the candidate,
special election.
the quality of the candidate, the quality of the incumbent,
turnout,
the money, turnout. So, but is every +5 Republican seat in play?
But go back to Mr. Franklin's enthusiasm gap. Democrats 10% higher. Yeah.
Can they maintain that through November? Where is the line of what your seat's in play? And then with Mr. Ryan, don't forget, there's still questions about what he's going to do. The crystal ball that Larry Sabato does over at the University of Virginia downgraded the Ryan seat from safe Republican to likely Republican, all because of the questions, will Ryan run? Now, if he were to announce now he's not going to run, the symbolism, somebody told me this week, would be devastating for Republicans.
Okay.
Here's a leader taking off right when this looks like he's getting tough, right?
That's true. Okay.
It's more likely, go back to speakers who have lost a majority, a lot of them resign after the election and go back to the private sector.
Okay.
So
I get it.
Got to watch that.
Okay, now you got 30 seconds. Mr. Holder, former Attorney General, just on campus campaigning for Rebecca
in Milwaukee
Dallett.
Thursday.
Give us the 30-second update on the Supreme Court race.
$140,000 in digital ads from Holder's group supporting Rebecca Dallett. Rebecca Dallett had a polling memo out this week from her campaign that she was at 41 to 30 for Schronek.
That was her campaign.
Her campaign polling. It was a polling memo, not the poll itself, so take it with a grain of salt.
I do.
I hear conservatives have polls that show her up, but a lot of undecideds, and they can move people if they have the right ads. The thing is, we are just more than 2.5 weeks out. I haven't seen a conservative ad buy yet. Where are the conservative groups spending money for Michael Schrunick to get him through the general election? They spent $600 grand on TV and radio in the primary. Why isn't it coming yet? That's something to watch the next week and a half.
Something to watch, you bet. We will have a lot to talk about next week with both the Senate and the Assembly in session. Final question, when Buffalo beat Arizona, did it blow the hell out of your brackets?
I don't do brackets.
I see.
I covered basketball for a couple of years, and I realized how bad it made me look when I did so poorly.
What a diplomatic answer. That's Rewind for March 16th. I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
Rewind, Your Week in Review is sponsored by the Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. Sharing one goal, enhancing the quality of life in Wisconsin through the development and maintenance of a strong transportation network. The Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. It's how we get there.